voice is so entertaining. Okay, so back here with I almost called you Dr. Blas. Back here with Mr. Blas, unless you prefer Doctor.
This is good.
So we're back here with Blas for another opportunity, just connect, talk more on healing, and um, yeah, just more extraction of. I think you have a very particular way of looking at life, and you're highlighting something very nuanced and very beautiful. And I love seeing that, and it excites me to just connect with you more over it. You know, I have no idea what's about to happen, and I don't like planning out for these things because it usually leads to the best stuff when I don't plan. So, yeah, I'm excited to have you here.
I feel excited to be here. I'm like, you're like, what's, you have a beautiful way of looking at life. And I started asking myself, what is my way of looking at life? Part of the reason I was glad I was here was there wasn't like an immediate kind of answer. And I was like, Dr. Keith won't care.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it seems like it's shifting lately. Yeah, I did a bunch of cold plunging this morning
Mm-hmm.
and just meditating in a sauna. And the last, like, life's always good, but the last month or two, just like frustrations coming up and doing all this stuff like, oh, let's, figure out what the problem is. Let's, um, do good things for myself. And today I was like, just not. And there's a line from the Bible, he who takes his eye off the plow isn't fit for the kingdom of heaven. I was like, I think I'm just gonna stay in these sensations and just commit to staying with them. And it felt like kind of like a culmination especially of all the suffering. Like in the last couple months, just things that are just my feelings are hurt about. And if it was great, it just felt like I think the the I don't know, want to say the problem, but like the the suffering, it mostly came from wanting it to go away. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm like really familiar with this feeling of like like I've experienced it as like we're holding on to the suffering, and I'm like, I'm suffering, I'm suffering. How do I get rid of this? How do I get rid of this? How do I get rid of this? And then I like step up another layer, and I'm like, oh, like what if I just let go of that resistance? And like that was the actual suffering. And then I'm like, accept the thing in my life, and then it just kind of like almost becomes like mist like where it just kind of like slowly dissipates out. So
Yeah, I don't know what replaced it or what happened, but especially in my mind, it's just like every thought that comes up, I just started taking it so seriously. Like, of course you think like that. Of course you've been hurt in that way, so many times. And of course you feel and think in that direction. Like Like it just makes so much sense, and just everything. Thoughts of defending myself, thoughts of um, being good enough, thoughts of safety, thoughts of lovability. It's just like, of course. It really made me, at first, there was like one kind of thought that was like, oh, there's so much. Like, almost like it almost turned into, I'll never be able to love all of this. And then I kind of just like dodged it and just like kept, loving myself. Something just shifted. It's wonderful. And I feel very committed. Like even right now, I really want to just, it's weird. You know, some people say like they want to be loved unconditionally. I've always been like, eh, I pretty much only love other people conditionally. Like I don't have kids.
Mm.
Even if I had kids, if they, you know, punch me in the nose, I'd probably love them a little less. But I was like, maybe I could just start with me. Maybe I can just love myself unconditionally. And I'm trying it like right now. Just like, can I love myself right now unconditionally?
How are you holding like both parts? Like I imagine there's a part of you that holds yourself conditionally in love, and then there's another part that holds like unconditionally in love. Do you feel like maybe like I'm having the imagination like you're polarizing? You're like I just want to look at this side, like I just want to look at the unconditional side. And I bring this up because it's reminding me of I had my birthday a couple of weeks ago, and of course I went to circling and I had a birthday circle, on my birthday, right? And we had this interesting thing where somebody said, "Oh, I'm like feeling sadness and grief with you," and I'm like, "I feel great right now." And then I was like, "Wait," I was like, "Oh yeah, that's there," you know. And I was like, "Well, I keep having moments where I wanted to make an excuse or say something, and it was like my victim was coming into the room, but I was like,
Excuse like what?
what?"
Excuse. Do you have an example?
It's hard to remember. I just remember like not wanting to make excuses, like not wanting to show up as a victim. I don't remember the specific situation to be honest. But what I do remember and recall was the like integrating the victim. I realized I was like saying I don't want to be the victim ever, ever, ever. And then I was like, wait, this is like a part of me. Like this is sitting here. And I was like, why don't you just let it be the victim instead of like trying to be like, I want to be the person that never shows up as a victim and never has excuses always. But it was like I was rejecting some part of myself. So I was like, I'm just gonna let the victim in, let the victim be the victim, and like I don't have to do what the victim wants necessarily, and it's still part of me. So I'm like curious about like you holding, imagining you're doing like something similar where it's like you're holding the unconditional and the conditional part, and I'm like, is Mike like, is he just focusing on the unconditional part and not giving the conditional part attention or like allowing it to be? And I imagine you might be, but
Well, the closest like I could get to finding just awareness of conditional was like, I have goals, but what what came up, or the a memory or experience that comes up when you asked about the polarizing, was, I'm meditating, I'm watching my breath, and then I get distracted. And normally when I would get distracted in the past, there'd be this just almost like a cattle prod, like a you messed up. And today, more than any day, it was like when I'd lose um, track of my breath because I'd start my mind would start wandering. There was like a kind of like a surge of compassion. Like, of course, your mind wandered. You're a human.
Yeah.
And then I'd come back to my breath. And so I don't know if I'm polarizing, but it was like it was almost like the mistakes were like just more of an opportunity to be nice to myself.
Like an opportunity to practice what you're
Yeah,
trying to do.
yeah,
I just pictured you like running towards the distractions to like practice it more. Like sit down to meditate to get distracted so you can practice having compassion with yourself.
yeah. I was talking to this group yesterday, and there was one guy in the group who's pretty rational. And whenever that happens, I kind of like what I like about like math. I'm like not a mathematician, but I liked math when I did it. Like it'll come into my language. And I was like, we only pay attention on the integers. It's like one, two, three. It's like significant. They're significant somehow. And then at 1.1, 1.2, 1.207, 1.209, it's like we just kind of coast. I just kind of coast on by. I don't I don't let myself be there. And uh, you know, we were just kind of going around. I was like, if in right and wrong, right is like the size of a mathematical point. It's exactly right. And then in right and wrong makes everything else wrong. And our first reaction to wrong is, I think, like a little zap, and I think the zap is trying to motivate us, but it doesn't necessarily make us more present, you know. When we're striving, we don't let ourselves be present because we're trying to get to the thing. We're trying to get to the place to be present. Yeah. I just got so excited. Like, man, there's a lot of opportunity.
I had something that came to mind at the start, and it's coming up again. Is something I'm finding within myself in my life right now is the balance between, and I think we talked a little bit about this on the first one, which was like the balance between like aimlessness and like, or I don't know if aimlessness is the right word, but I'll keep going with this. It's like aimlessness and like certainty. There's like the like structured, like this is what's going to happen next. This is step one, two, three, four. And then there's the like, let's see what happens, type of
Uh,
thing. And I'm particularly interested in like flow states, especially because there's like you move towards this like lack of structure and like something more magical starts to come out. But it's like if you go into that state with a little bit of your ego starts like going wild. But if you can like really leave your ego behind, it's almost just magical. So there's almost like you kind of want to like dive in completely and I'm interested in like the presence or like what comes up in you as I'm talking about this of like being in that state, and maybe like I'm craving like having an aim in that state. Really, I need to be present with aimlessness or present with the like lack of purpose, lack of structure. But there's almost like I think there's frustration that brews in me, like stepping into maybe like you're talking about between the one and two of like how much could be in between. It's like, are we going to land on 1.0268 or are we going to land on 1.389? Are we going to, it's like there's a lot that could happen in between one and two. And like, I'm hoping to
Infinite.
like, yeah, I'm like hoping to like tack it down in some way. And maybe I'm answering my own question, but just like being more present with the aimlessness.
What do you mean, tack it down?
Hmm. Like, I guess like using it in some way. Like I want to utilize um, the randomness or chaoticness within like reality or within life. Like there's a desire to like package it into a battery or something, and like, okay, cool, now I got this like really powerful battery. But like the nature of it, I feel like the nature of chaoticness or randomness, it like isn't designed to be packaged in some way.
It's interesting. Okay, I want to push pin that. Not not designed to be packaged. I like that. I'm I'm with like like flow is like we think of a structure,
Mm-hmm.
and like structures kind of stay there. And I don't know. I'm gonna have to get like somebody, an architect or physicist or something. But I'm like, what's the structure of like someone's like gait while they're walking? Like what is it when their legs and their body, it has a structure, but it's in motion. Is there a word for that?
um like something has structure, but it's like continuous or moving. It's not necessarily like a stagnant static thing. Yeah, it's like dynamic.
Dynamic structure.
The word that came to mind, I don't know if you've ever read this book. It keeps coming up for me, but it's called The Courage to be Disliked. And he had a term, he called it energile.
What does it
And
mean?
it means to like, you're not focused. It's basically be present in the moment and like be in the dance of life. So it's like being consistently moving with life. So you're not planning for the future or planning for the past. You're just like present and here, and like you're moving with the dance of life. It doesn't mean necessarily that you like are aimless, like you don't have a point or like you don't put effort towards things. Because that would be kind of heading towards like nihilistic viewpoint, which is like there's no point, so I'm not going to do anything. Like there's no point, so I'm just going to keep moving with this dance and flow of life and be intentional with every single moment. So it's like if I, and I don't know if there's any like mechanical biomechanical term for like the gate, but if I like took a picture of your gate at a certain moment, I'm like, there's the structure. And then 2 seconds later, I take another picture and I'm like, there's the structure. It's like there's structure in each like finite moment, and or like a movie, right? It's like picture, 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 and they're putting in a stream, right, together. So that's the word that I think of as like energile. I don't know if there even is a word that exists for what you're talking about, but I think it is.
We need a word. I've always said way of being. Um, and I think if it's not a structure, let's call it like a energile. Let's call it an energile. So like one time I was walking. I used to work when I was like in my early 20s. I used to run a wading pool in Seattle. So like it was like 8 inches deep, and I had to like fill it up and put chlorine in it every day. And then the latchkey kids in the neighborhood would come, and I had a bunch of like board games and ping pong, and we would just play all day. And I remember this one mother used to bring her baby. His name was Jacob, and he was he was the age where he could walk if he was grabbing onto her finger. And so we were walking to some stairs, and he was like looking at him, like, what do I do with these? He never walked downstairs, and I took a step, and he was watching me, and he started copying me. And so when going all the way back to when you said, I wish we could package this, I think it's like energize, proliferate, like mimetically by being mimicked. And so it's not like packaged. Um, it has to be packaged in a human, and it has to be um, shared personally. I think that's like the big belief of mine is that if there is any saving in the world to do, it will be done personally. Not like no one, we're not going to make a podcast so good that the fighting in Gaza ends, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting you say that. I have my I referred to it as the healer's dilemma, which is somebody comes to me for healing, but I can't heal them. Only the body can heal itself because I'm not the thing actively organizing it or controlling how it, heals and all that type of stuff. I don't have the blueprint. So it's like it's kind of a dilemma because then it's like, how do I heal this person because they're asking for it, and I know the power is already within them, you know, and you kind of hit a spot in there, a little soft. I wouldn't say soft spot, but like a spot, a button when you say that, because I'm like, don't need to save the world, and that's something that I've really digested. Where I'm like, I've had this from some of my colleagues, where it's like I need to go impact the world or save the world or do this thing, and then the question that comes to mind for me is like, does the world need saving? Is it my job to like save the world? And I wonder sometimes if that's just coming from like a hero complex, like I need to. It's like the ego coming out saying, "Hey, I need to save the world" or something like that.
I
Maybe I'm going off
wonder,
track from where we want to go.
that's okay. It's like part of me is like, where did it come from is definitely like a line of inquiry. Where, what else could it be is another line of inquiry. How? Um, I remember, have you ever seen the movie Firefly?
No, I haven't actually.
Like a sci-fi. And the premise is there's these resistance fighters who lost. Now they're smugglers. And one of the crew members is like special and has information that the government does not want to get out. So they send this kind of, he's almost like a monk in his discipline, but he's vicious in his, you know, gaming towards an outcome. And he keeps talking about, the new world, the new galaxy or whatever kind of world they're going to create. But he's like horrible. And so the protagonist is like, you're going to create a world, um, and you do such evil things. And what the guy says to him is he's like, no, no, I'm a sin eater. there's no place for me in the new world. And like a sin eater is a term for somebody who does evil for good. And I just thought, oh, it's so interesting. Like, who in this saved world, like, who gets to go?
Hmm.
Well, not anybody who does violence underhandedly for good, according to the metaphor. And I was like, that's that day, I was like, I'm gonna be a citizen of the saved world right now. I'm gonna be the Energile starting now with my gate and just be with everybody personally. And there's a part of me that's like, can feel the specter of somebody shouting, prove it, prove that that's going to
Yeah.
work or prove that's effective. And I was like, I don't, I don't do that.
Huh.
I can't prove it. When I watched Firefly, I had this idea of just how it, who, if the world wasn't going to be saved, didn't need to be saved, how would we act? And I'm like, I'm just going to be that guy, the one that's already like responding with care to what I see right in front of me. Yeah.
The world didn't need saving. How would I act? My first thought is like play. I think there'd be so much more play.
Right. Play. What else?
Uh,
I'd still grieve, right?
yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think there would be less attachment to like morality.
Yeah.
I'm imagining for others, like, because then it wouldn't be life wouldn't be a pursuit of right or wrong. 'Cause it wouldn't be like a pursuit to get to the promised land. It's like if the promised land is here, then what's there to work towards? Type of thing. This kind of goes back to like that quasi state of like aimlessness and like and it reminds me of the conversation of I'm sure you've listened to Alan Watts, but he has one. He's like, what if you were God? Like, what would you do? And he talks about how you would just like continuously like you would get bored because you have everything. He's like, you would go wild for like a few weeks because you're omnipotent, omniscient, you could do anything you want. And then he's like, you would kind of get bored, of like what's going on. And I understand he's projecting a personality on God as well. So, and he's like, you might add like a little bit of mystery, like something you don't expect into your life. And you're like, oh, I kind of like that. And you'd add a little bit more and a little bit more. And he's like, you would end up
Yeah.
right back where we are right now. And I was like, I've been putting that on for years. It's so just like interesting. It kind of brings me back into what we're talking about right now, which is, it's like if everything was achieved, if the promised land was now, what would you do? I guess you would just be and enjoy it. Like there'd be
Yeah,
nothing left to do.
totally. But like I'd enjoy it. And then, I mean, if I look at my life now, I would still want to connect with people. And no matter how saved the world's going to be, people are still going to kind of like, I'm going to say it's like unlock the further reaches of me. I kind of discover who I am with people. I was with this woman at this workshop I just did, and I noticed she would do this at certain points in the session, and I'd say, "Why are you doing that? What is that?" And she was like, "Oh, it's nothing." Well, it turns out every time she would see somebody's suffering, her nervous system would kind of jump. And I was like, what do you think of the jumping? She says, well, when I see somebody hurting and nobody else sees it, I feel lonely. And I was like, huh. And I sat with it. And there is a little pain in me when when I think I'm the only one noticing struggle or suffering. And we kept dialoguing what's your sensation like? This is what my sensation is like. What's your sensation like? It was really seemed like they were the same thing. We started calling it the loneliness of compassion. And I was like, I'm I'm like a new man, you know, from her sharing that, from her helping me become. And I don't think that'll ever stop, no matter how saved the world is.
What's new?
Sensation I've lived with as far back as I can remember, almost like has a new hat or a new name. People, there's classes on it, on compassion, where they'll teach you how to be compassionate. My belief is that's probably really helpful, but I bet the standard human comes equipped with some compassion.
I found like humor. I was trying to hold back a laugh when I heard that. Like, I'm gonna teach you how to be compassionate.
Yeah.
I, like I equate that to like I'm gonna teach you how to be hungry. You're just hungry. Like what? Like is there? I don't know. It just seems silly to me in some way. And I understand this like if we dissect it, like yeah, we could probably figure out some like behaviors or strategies to like initiate it.
That's kind of what I remember when I was talking about the integers.
Yeah.
So, like, there's right on the integers, there's right compassion and wrong compassion.
Hmm.
And in the decimal points, what I think I'm seeing is um, the the details, or yeah, sometimes when you feel compassion, it can come with some extra fear. Like maybe I'm the only one that knows and I'm the only one that can help. Or maybe um, this is too much for me. I was just trying to think about like, you know how to use an umbrella, right? There's like the right way to use an umbrella and the wrong way to use an umbrella. Well, and sometimes you're walking with your umbrella and a gust of wind will come. And there's that little kind of Mary Poppins moment where you're like, I don't want to lose my umbrella. I don't want the wind to break my umbrella. I'm going to loosen my grip so that it pulls a little bit. But if I pull too hard, I know it's going to invert and I'm going to need a new umbrella. So there's like so many kind of beautiful details, I think, about our experience that we code as wrong instead of
Hmm.
granular, you know?
Yeah. So there's like I'm like in me, I'm like, okay, what he's talking about is like the gray areas of life. And I'm like, he could have said like, oh, there's grays in between one and two, but like you're trying to get at something deeper, and I'm putting that on of like what it sounds like is like it's typical for humans to impose wrongness on all the grays, and like there's like one true like right in the heavens. This is how it's supposed to look perfectly. When in reality, we've imposed a morality on all the gray areas, which is like the details, and there's potentials for more experience within each one.
Yeah. Like I used to say, when we're focusing on somebody and we're like, what's it like to be you right now? I used to tell students, like, okay, every once in a while, just tell them what you're getting about them. There's this strange effect where if you say what you're getting about somebody and it kind of rings true for just a second, they go from kind of like treading water or swimming to like stable, like on a raft or an island, just for a sec. And then if you start saying, well, what's going on now? They'll start looking and the swimming will kind of start happening. And I think that effect is something like um, when we say what we get about them and they feel gotten, I think that they call that moment right. Just a second, they get to be right. I'm me, they see me, it fits, and
Yeah.
it's not a condemnation. Those are probably the criteria, and they get to rest right there. And I'm really thinking like there's way more opportunity for rest in between the the rightnesses.
It's like it's interesting because what was going through my head was like confirmation. Like there's some type of melding between the internal and external world. Like when we're holding something internally, where you're like, okay, what's that like? And we like flip our eyes back and like look inside, and we're like, okay, okay. I think it's this and this and this is it. And it's like we know ourselves internally with our internal selves. And then when we get like external like confirmation or like I won't say validation or confirmation, it's like, oh, I'm not crazy.
When
And so it's
when
like it instead of just internal, it's external with internal. And it's like that bridge all of a sudden crossing into that like rest phase you're talking about. It's tread, tread, tread. Oh,
when you said we know ourselves, my part of my brain wanted to say something like, I think we like hope we know ourselves or suspect we know ourselves or something.
think we know.
Yeah. And then when it gets confirmed from the outside, then we're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And I'm sitting with this came up actually birthday circle the last time you came up here. um, was I requested a birthday circle, and when something that came out of me was I don't feel safe in the external or the internal world. Like I don't feel like there's a place to retreat to. And it was like when I'm external, I don't have like trust. But I'm like when I'm internal, I also don't trust myself. So it's like I think of this idea, or maybe like an introvert that's like, oh, it's too much out here. Let me retreat into myself. And then it was like I hit the back of the wall and I'm like, there's nowhere to retreat. Like I can't go back any further. And so it makes me think of like there's like an innate aspects of ourselves to not trust ourselves.
And then why does that make sense?
Um I think I think it's the float. Like it feels like you just confirmed something in me, which was like, oh, like I do that thing, and maybe it's not just me. Like maybe I'm not the only one that doesn't trust their internal world or trust themselves or has suspicion of their own thoughts. And it feels broader. So instead of like it feels so hilarious. It's like exactly back to what you're saying, where it's like there's loneliness in that. Like, oh, I'm the only one that experiences this experience of being with myself and not trusting myself. And it's like, oh no, I have that too. Oh, huh. There's like less loneliness in it. It's like, oh, okay. Like, we all struggle with trusting ourselves at times or having suspicion of ourselves. I like the word suspicion. It feels more apt.
Aggressive doubt.
Maybe.
That's how I think of suspicion. When you first brought it up, I thought about, like, when a child's born, like, you imagine being a baby. It'd be weird, like, if I could hold you in my arms and carry you around, and every time we saw somebody, they were like, "Can I see Keith?" And I was like, "Yeah, look at him." And they were like, "He's beautiful." You
I'm
know,
enjoying this analogy so far.
and and that's why it's natural for children to be narcissists. Because in their kind of understanding of the world, they're like a lightning rod of attention, affection, and love. One of the um, hallmarks of narcissistic thought is they think it's like all about them. So when you put that in a child's kind of frame, there's like a 4-year-old who can hear his parents fighting. He's seen his parents get happy when they've interacted with him. And so now they're fighting. It's very, I think people don't realize how natural it is for a child to think a thought that probably sounds like, I must be the problem. I must, I must have caused this problem. Does that make sense?
Is that stemming from the narcissism?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's just their brains just are just very tricked into thinking that the world revolves around them. I mean, think of the way we used to be kind of heliocentric about the universe, or even earth centric. Like, we're the only planet, God made it, it's the only one, the important one, like a mirror of that kind of thinking. And I think that just that kind of thinking in itself can insert a lot of doubt into us. When we think we're in control of everything on some level, and then things don't go well.
Yeah. Never looked at narcissism as necessarily like a possible negative in that way.
Yeah.
I think when I think of narcissism, I always think of like the grandiose like vision of self. Like it's like I'm the greatest, I'm this, all this, but like also some narcissism of like being self-centered or self-focused. Self-focused might be better just because we use self-centered a lot, but like
Yeah. Almost like innocently narcissist.
yeah,
It's like, well, how else would that person think about themselves if the only people they ever met went, "It's you. You're here now. Will you touch me? Because that will make me feel better." You know?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you think there's such thing as like too much impact? Like I imagine there might be like I'm thinking about that, like I'm imagining there's like a healthy balance between treading water and like floating. And especially on this topic of like narcissism or like being too self-centered focused, it's like, is it possible like where we over impact, where we like keep reflecting our impact for a person to the point where they're just now they're not going to deeper layers. They're just kind of like staying at arm's reach of deeper connection.
So when you say impact, you mean like kind of mindful biofeedback?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I'll reflect this in a conversation I had with Joshua because this is where my mind's going right now. Is he was talking to me, he's like, you have really good intuition in circling. I'm like, awesome, thank you. And he's like, you don't reveal yourself enough. He's like, you need to reveal yourself more so that the other person can feel you moving deeper with them. So he's like, you move deeper with them, as in you feel the connection of them, you experience them more. But he's like, when you reveal impact, it allows them to sync with you or soften with you. And so that's what I'm thinking about, like impact or revealing self in order for the other person to feel more connection. But looking at it in this lens instead of like, could it? be maybe a negative thing or disconnect the person by just continually revealing impact?
Um, I would definitely I've seen lots of variations, and I've seen, like, mm, it's weird to go nowhere into right, wrong. Like, if when someone's getting a birthday circle or a focus session, we surround them with people that are all empathizing with them, and we're giving them feedback. And one thing I think happens a lot of times is this kind of goes back to this decimal point thing. They'll get to a spot and then everybody kind of waits with bated breath. And sometimes right there, this kind of pressure to get to the next integer can spring up in them. If the people are really skilled, then there's less likelihood of that happening. And we can just stay at like 1.7 and be like, yeah, you want to, you came pretty far from one, and now we're here right now all together. So that's good. And that kind of getting that much feedback from like a lot of people, maybe. Your example was like one-on-one, but or didn't specify a lot of people, but getting a lot of feedback can be good. Another thing that I think is good is I call it like a non sequitur. And it basically means it's like Latin for out of sequence. So, like when we're in a flow and you're talking about something, standard conversation traffic norms are the next thing I say has to be at least tangentially related to what you said, right? And this is a way I feel like people can control conversations because they know that everybody's kind of working with those traffic norms. What I've been finding lately is when we really purposefully, I'll tell the group, we're going to trust that anything that does come up is in connection, even past the point of whether we can see how or justify why. So I could be like, I'm totally, oh, it was okay. This is a replay of one thing that happened this last weekend. Um, a woman was talking about her worry about getting pregnant. Okay. And people were kind of we're in a flow, but people were focusing in. And we were getting more. She was revealing more, but it kind of just was where it was. And her husband was there. And so strange. They're both very intelligent people. Somebody said, "What about you? What do you think?" And like in the chain of like standard conversation, I think everybody was really hoping, waiting for him to say something loving, something endearing. Let's just imagine there's like a little bit of subconscious narcissism in all of us. His response, he referenced this moment when when two other participants were talking about one of them being attracted to the other one that had happened like 30 minutes ago. They said, "What about you?" He goes, "Well, I'm thinking so and so's doesn't said that this other person was hot and didn't realize that I'm hot too." And then said, "Hey," to the person that had been attracted at, "Hey, you want to make out, make her jealous?" And like this was right after his wife um, had been talking about having a baby. So it was just so funny because it was so like left field. And I really do think some people would have been hurt. But this couple, I mean, they married the right people because she was just so delighted that he actually just said the truth instead of kind of trying to find some way to turn her pain down. He just said what he was actually thinking about. I'm thinking I want to make this person jealous. And it was like it was weird. Just I could feel like this pressure in my chest, just like alleviate, instead of it having to be this kind of like a symphony of intent to like save this person. Just so much pressure was alleviated because he didn't follow the traffic norm. I think she fell in love with him like all over again when he said that. It was so
That is like so fascinating. Because it's funny because we have this like the part of me that's like social norms. I'm like caretaking as well as like not being nice or like all this type of stuff. And then we're seeing something complete opposite. It reminds me of like the jerk mentality, right? Where women are like, oh, I want the guy that's really nice, and then they go after the jerk, right? And there's like something in that masculine dominant energy that's like attractive in the field. And so it's like I'm just like finding humor in like there is something about the not caretaking that was actually like accepting. Like it was actually like acknowledging of what was there. Was like not dropping, like in some way dropping it or like going somewhere else was not dropping it. It's super fascinating.
it was so fascinating. Yeah. It's like I think it was a good example of like a, a noticing in the saved world. Like my wife knows I love her. My wife knows I care about um, her suffering. Of course she knows.
Yeah. There's This is making me think of this, but it's a question I ask myself sometimes. It's like, do I trust the relationship enough to risk it? Or like risk it with honesty? And it's like, I feel like it's a sign of more connection of like being able to say something so what we consider like belligerent or off topic or narcissistic or like whatever it is. And it's like there's an underlying like implicit trust in where it's coming from. It reminds me of when you said, I ask because I trust your no. Like I trust that you'll say no. You don't want it. But it's like there can be, I imagine this happens more often. I've had that at least for me, like more with women, is they won't ask something because they're scared the no or yes won't be true. Scared it's gonna be a lie.
There's this idea. I think it's Keegan. Robert Keegan has these
Mhm.
five orders of development, and they're interesting in themselves. But like the stage one is just having needs. Stage two is I think maybe it's like regulating your needs. Stage three is regulating your needs in relationship to others. I think I'm getting that wrong somehow, but it's okay. And then stage four is like I use peeing. So like I pee my pants. I know when I'm gonna pee. I don't pee at certain times because my mother doesn't seem to like it. And then there's this like fourth order that's like I'm I'm downtown, I'm 27 with my friends. I need to pee. I know the cops would not approve of this. So I step behind a dumpster and like just get it done. So those are the 4 orders so far. And like the third one is kind of like that social mindset. And the fourth one is like, you can think about like Tony Robbins or people that kind of like have you grab your power. So the fifth one is called interdependence. And they say, you know, if you do achieve interdependence, it's going to be in like your 70s or 80s. It's going to be when you're with people and you guys need so much. There's no longer an economy to needs. It's just a collaborative effort to feed ourselves, bathe ourselves, kind of get it done. It's really beautiful. It's kind of like the goal or the direction, you know,
Mhm.
flow and relatefulness is trying to go. And I saw a YouTube video of a woman who went to a Keegan lecture. She was kind of like giving a synopsis of one of the parts. She said, most people at the other 4 orders, most people have an identity. And then like, so like I'm here, and you're there. And between us is a relationship. She said, well, what he said was people that make it all the way to the 5th order, instead, they, instead of the relationship changing between all the people, relationship becomes this fixed thing that we know recreates this person. So like right now, we're Mike Keith or Keith Mike. And I knew coming in here just subtly that I would be created in this relationship. I've lost track of why I started talking about this, but oh, because you were talking about that relationship. And what I think, this is like strong claim. I think humans that don't progress to the 5th order have a lot of trouble with their psychology because their identities get frozen. So instead of being created, they self-violently stay the same.
Mm.
And the kind of infiniteness of their subjectivity gets locked up. And instead of getting to kind of become a new version of themselves, and see that other people are always becoming, they've been loved as the identity they are, and they're going to hold out as that identity until the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm digesting it because you dropped some. I'm paralleling it with my knowledge, one in network, but also through like the logic that I've gone through. Like, it's kind of a question I'm sitting with is like, what's Mike trying to get at? Like, what's he trying to inform me of? And something that's coming to mind, which is like what it sounds like is like the connection is actually the thing that's fixed, and the identity is produced by the connection. So like when we're in connection, the parts of me that adapt and mirror to the connection is what we call the identity, which shifts and changes and molds to whatever the connection is. And so instead, if we have a focus on the connection, we get a little bit closer to like what is like real and like what's here, what's present. I mean, and you could even say we get more energized, right? It's like we're more like now. And if we're in the reverse, and I kind of think of it, this is a cool thing I learned in art class, which is like there's a couple different ways you can draw, and one of the ways is like we used a chair essentially. So like you can draw a chair, but they're like what if you drew everything that wasn't the chair? And I was like, that's an interesting concept beyond art. Like, what if we looked at everything that wasn't the chair? So instead of like finding the identity, what if we looked at everything that wasn't the identity? And like one of those things is the connection. It's like this, like it's like taking your sock or shirt and flipping it inside out, right? It's like it's still a sock. We're just seeing another side of it. And so I'm kind of looking at that where it's like when people focus too much on the identity and they sit with the identity, they become fixated on maintaining themselves and they get locked into these like stories. And it's like, well, I can't, and I see this in my practice all the time. It's like people come in and they say, because of so and so story, I can't heal. And so it's like, if you've already decided you can't heal, why are you coming in? And so it's like and this is kind of gets weird where it's like, this is kind of more of a nuanced thing I'm trying to learn and practice, which is how do we update the story? And maybe the method is focus on connection.
well, yeah. And then another, I think, right, like let's put focus on connection as like the new integer. And I think there's a ton around there. Like one of them, I've met a lot of couples who have told me, I know everything about them, the other person in the partnership. And I'm like, there's no way. There's literally no way that's possible. Like if this subjectivity has infinite permutations, it's just impossible to know somebody. I mean, the other person could say, yeah, you know everything about me. And the thing I find the most is when they talk, they never talk about each other the way they talk to each other. And that's somehow my proof that they really don't know each other 100%. And like when you can love someone and not know them, then I just think, okay, I just unlocked you from from being an identity for me. And I think when we do that, we unlock ourselves. Like when we kind of set other people free to change, that's when we really um, get freed too. Yeah.
It's almost like permission to change. It's like if I'm
Yeah.
locked in my identity, I know everything about you because you need to be locked in your identity. We're like two separate pieces on this board, right? But if we like flip the perspective of like,
Musty, dusty pieces.
yeah, it's like your opinion could change right now.
Right.
Like you could completely change your opinion right in this moment. And instead of holding that, I'm getting drawn back into. I had this question, which was we have orientation and network, which is internal, external. I, the energetic flow or the direction of flow of energy is switched. So like externals, the energy comes from outside in versus internals, it comes from inside out, essentially. And so internals, it's typically better to focus on their internal energy source where the past is usually resides. Externals focus on outside, they focus on the universe. One of the funny things about externals is and I think this is also kind of a human thing just in general, but externals tend to crave novelty. Like they want new things. They want something like fresh, new. Like the second they get something, they might like, right? Like I'm thinking of like Peter Piper Pizza or like Chuck E. Cheese's where they have all like the tickets for the toys and all that type of stuff. Like an external, like the second they get the toy, they're like, this is boring. But like the whole process of getting to it and like trying to get like super excited, or like they want to get married and they're super excited about the engagement and getting to it, and then they finally get married and then they're like, I'm bored. It's like they lose the novelty of like, I don't know what this is gonna be like. I don't, and then it becomes familiar. And one of the things I asked myself, me being external, was like, how can I stay present with somebody and not be like held down by my novelty, which I definitely have that in my own personal life. And I'm like, what if I just like stayed so present that every second was like they're a new human being? And so it's like sitting, on a web page and just keep hitting refresh. just keep hitting refresh. And same thing like you're saying, where it's like it's impossible to know everything about somebody. And I learned this from circling, especially. I learned this from circling, which was like, what if I treat him like I know what grieving is for me? This person says they're grieving. I could be like, oh yeah, I know what grieving is. I know what you're experiencing. And we could just drop it there. But like instead engaging in the question of
What's grieving like?
yeah, what is that like for you? Hitting the refresh button. Oh well, it just hurts. Refresh. What's hurt like? Just feels like a stabbing in the chest. Huh.
I know when I do that, it's so strange. They never say what I thought they would say. But
Yeah.
when I'm not doing that and guessing, they often agree to what I guessed. Interesting.
Like the difference between leading and open questions.
Yeah, like I'll say, "Is it like this?" Yeah, and it's like they're yeah, and my is like, "Yeah, that's a suitable answer." But when they say it, it's almost like you just unpacked this nebula. There's a whole universe in there, and it's really cool. I learned, I told these guys, I do this for me. I learned so much about myself paying attention to other people. I think it's just wonderful. You know, like, yeah, help me unlock my identity. I'll be here. I'm not gonna like, I'm not gonna use you totally, but
Yeah.
I can use my desire to be unlocked to give you some great attention.
I'm like so it's like very beautiful things being distilled in my brain right now, my mind. It like one thing was like focusing on like the rusty piece or like the dusty piece, excuse me, dusty piece, right? It's like if we focus on the dusty piece, we know what it looks like. It's like nothing new under the sun. So we just keep repeating the same stories. But when we focus on somebody else, we hear a new story. And then we like compare it to our like dusty piece. And we're like, maybe, yeah, yeah, okay. We're like kind of re-situate it or, we're adjusting a little bit. And I was also thinking about like one of my goals in adjusting is pattern interruption. So what typically happens, and this happens like neurologically, is like people go on autopilot, but more specifically, like it's a broken record where they're like crunk, 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 and it just keeps playing the same story. And so all of a sudden a new bit of information comes to the nervous system, and the nervous system's like, wait a minute, what do I want to do with this? And I imagine the same thing is like the same process, and maybe I'm not looking at neurophysiology, but like same process in circling where it's like new information, pattern interrupts, and then it's what do I want to do about this?
When you said that, when you said pattern interrupt, I my brain went to showed me pictures of one of the things I'm looking for interruption with, like that I fondly call my suffering. And it was almost like a trauma response. I got glassy eyed listening to you, felt shame. And then I, there's some way I trusted something about being here with you, where I was like, it's a little bit of a non sequitur, but my guess is Keith will be okay if I'm, yeah, if I let what's actually happening happen in me. Yeah.
Keith will be okay if you let what's happening in you happen. I'm curious about the part of like Keith will be okay.
Yeah. Like you won't see it as I broke our relationship by not following the traffic norm. You won't see it as I broke our relationship by um, not listening perfectly and keeping my focus perfect. You won't think I broke the relationship because I haven't finished letting myself let out feelings that I haven't integrated yet. Yeah.
It's like the okayness with being incomplete. I'm imagining there's like a fear that the incompleteness would obstruct or like ruffle the relationship.
Right. Right now, someone just walked into the room not knowing that I'm on a podcast.
Cool.
So I'm rotating.
How non sequitur sequitur.
Yeah. It's Sequitr.
It's your sequitur. Sequitur.
Used to be a comic strip by that name, and the character always would say something that didn't relate, but that was still funny.
I feel really slow with you today.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like drawn into your slowness.
I think that charge is still in me, but I think what I was telling you about loving myself. It's like right here, I'm definitely on a decimal point, and there's still that compulsion to find a right. Like the end of every sentence, I want to say something like cool.
What's the compulsion?
And yeah. Interesting. It's like, yeah, I'm just with the activation. I'm not trying to drum it up, but whenever embarrassment is, it's definitely sharper when I'm paying attention. There's definitely there's some kind of compulsion to not be embarrassed, at least from where I can see. Like, why didn't I tell that person? This is like the, the voice. Why didn't I tell that person my schedule better? Why why isn't that person the kind of person that would sense that I didn't want them to just walk through the room? And it's it can hear it in my voice. It just doesn't sound like I'm thinking clearly.
Yeah, it feels like I tried that wrong. It feels reactive and like heavy expectations on others.
When you said reactive, the charge like left my chest, feeling my gut a little bit, but I can look at you now.
What's the what about the sharpness? You mentioned it feels like sharp. Where's that at right now?
it's almost like in my peripheral vision, I'm threatened or um, under threat.
The what's the threat? Is it external, internal? Is it interpersonal? Is it
So yeah, it's it's an ex. It feels external. Someone's going to not sense what I need, and I won't have the wherewithal to tell them.
I pull? That feels like a lot. I feel my inner child come out, like when I was younger and I didn't know better to speak up for myself. There's like this, like almost like a praying that my parents or my family or siblings or friends would ask the right question or ask for me and what I need to tell them instead of just telling them what I need. Like the desire to like, oh, I just want you to read my mind already.
Right? Yeah. It's really tough to um, be sequitur at all right here. And I'm glad we got here. It's almost like I can't feel this one unless it's like interpersonal or situational. Like I can't feel my desire to be sensed when I'm alone.
I
Attuned.
just imagine it feels like pulled behind a curtain. Let's see.
My yeah, I feel right now I feel I want to say lost with you, and that feels good.
I was hoping you would say that. Like I want him to feel good, even if we're lost together. Feel explorative. Like we just got into a dropped in a forest and it's like there's almost like there's not a need to survive, but it's just like let's go explore and see what we find.
Hmm. Yeah, I can feel the some kind of like imperative towards the people listening to us, this recording, and some kind of, it's like a pressure, like, um, like in their little kind of pretend voice, they're like, "Hey, man, been listening to you for 90 minutes. Like just don't leave me hanging." And it almost feels like a bad, like a version of what I think of as a bad attitude about sex. It's like, when's the orgasm gonna happen?
It's like there's like something valuable that needs to happen or something that draws people in or makes it worth their time to sit for 90 minutes. I find humor because I didn't even like I totally forgot that I was even recording this until you said like people are gonna be listening to this. I was like, oh yeah, that's me who set this up. I forgot about that. And then I like had a quick moment. It felt like my animal brain was like, yeah, fuck them. Like I'm here with Blas right now. This is like what's important. And I'm like, I should probably not tell them to fuck them. If they're listening, all that stuff. And then I'm like pulling back to the narcissist we were talking about earlier. I'm like, what's real for me right now? I'm like, that's what's real for me is like I'm in the value of just being with you and giving a fuck about whoever's listening to this or not that I don't care. It's just like in this moment in time, it's like I, it's like me and you. I feel like really settled in that.
Yeah, my activation, it's still here, and I've just the wherewithal to be with you and to kind of shift my attitude um, towards like I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad this activation is here. It's not a big deal, but I did start the day wanting to love myself unconditionally. Hmm.
Feeling intimacy with you, and I'm a little like uncomfortable with it as well.
What's the discomfort?
It feels like intimacy with a lover,
Huh.
like that style of intimacy. So I think I have a little like discomfort with that. And there's something that feels fresh or new about the intimacy. I think I feel more settled or like accepting of it or more allowing of it, or more present with it.
What is there any? I like more settled. Is what what's the unsettled that's left?
Hmm. There's like unsettledness. I think it's with like sexuality is what's coming to mind.
Hmm.
There's unsettledness and uh like being with love, like fully engaging in love or fully like embracing, allowing love to be love. There's like a fear of like uncontrolled, like if I let love take me over, will I be in control of my body or my decisions or my behaviors or my actions? There's like, ooh, that feels scary. There also feels like a little tiny thing that's like it named all the parts really well, and there feels like there's a tiny thing, like a pebble at the bottom, of like another part that I can't see fully right now.
Hmm. What happened when you named him?
Was there was like a fear or scaredness in naming them, and as I named them off, I felt a little bit more settled. I felt more accepting of them, like it's okay for those things to be here, and I'm a little like nervous in the fact of like, oh, like I'm talking about intimacy with this man and sexuality, and, like love on a podcast, and I'm going to be putting this out. And you know what's weird is I've done this before on podcasts that I've made alone, and it feels scarier with somebody else on the call. Funny enough,
Hold that for a sec. I just
yeah,
want before it's not alive anymore.
yeah.
When when you named them, I heard a voice in my head that said, "He really trusts me," and my attunement kind of charge like settled back down.
I feel like a canal open up my midline. I feel really like sinking into my belly. Like it feels like charged or lit up in some way.
Feels like what?
Charged or lit up. Um, it was like it's like a box of potential energy was opened up a little bit, like cracked open. I was like, I didn't know I had that energy sitting around there. Like sparked a little fire. A little raw.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good raw because it's got like time to, like I have time to be with it. That's a luxury.
I don't know that I have time to be with it. That's a luxury. You know, it's my mind went completely blank when you said that. Like I didn't understand it.
Sure, this charge is going to be here afterwards. I can already feel like intrusive cognitions, like little thoughts that want to drum up, the fear. And I'm really observing them. And also, like, they're not like sticking, but it's almost like I've got time to feel this feeling. Probably been in my body for a very, very, very long time.
There's like two parts of like a part of unsettledness and then a part of like relaxation. Like, oh, I have time to feel. Like there's time. There's no like rush to like experience or process emotion and like drop it, that type of thing. Like I need to process this and get this out the door. Just like, oh, like I have it feels like I was given permission. I know I think you're saying that for yourself, but it feels like I was given permission to like take as much time as I want.
Hmm.
I'm like noticing my throat closing up, my esophagus after saying that. And I feel the fear of others pressuring me for time.
Huh.
Like internally, like I'm okay with the permissiveness of time, of taking all the time in the world, as much time as I'd like. And I feel the pressure. Like it almost like feels like there's a voice in the back of my head saying, like, you got to get it done sooner. Like it feels authoritative or oppressive of my desire to identify it's like lackadaisical or like free.
Your desire to identify.
I feel something that's like true for me, which is like I am a person and I typically show up in a way where I feel okay if something doesn't happen. Like if I don't reach the big goal or I don't save the earth or if I don't like I'm okay if I pass away or die and I didn't do something like that others would perceive as like mind blowing. And then I feel the contradiction of feeling like there's a voice in the back that's like, you have to do this.
Hmm. What? So you're definitely on a decimal point right now.
I
What else do you notice here?
feel excitement as I'm digging into it. Like I want to um there's a strong desire for me to be me in that experience, which is like careless. It's like I don't care. Like I don't it's like I don't care what you think. I don't care how you perceive me. I don't care what you want me to do. I'm gonna be me. And I want to hold myself vehemently in that. And it feels like it's lessening as I'm talking about it. It feels like it's almost like evaporated or gone after saying that. Like that background voice of like feeling oppressed or like I have to be somewhere or be something or have to be something or make something out of my life. And it's like there's a desire to just be and show up. And there's like a small part of like care, like a small part of I want to care for those in my life that do want that for me and be able to tell them to fuck off at the same time. Like it's like ownership of power, ownership of self, and like I have the power to decide. I have the power to choose my life to be meaningless. It sounds super weird, but that's what feels true for me. Like if I want it to be meaningless, I can make it meaningless, and that's my power to choose. So
I better close because it's about to get louder downstairs.
yeah. Well, thank you for this little tiny wormhole. To finish up, of course, where can we find you? Where we can hear more and connect with you?
Relateful.com for sure. And I love meeting people. So my Calendly link is calendly.com/Mike Blas.
Cool. Beautiful. Like, do I want any closing remarks or should we just awkwardly close it? Be non sequitur.
It's related for sure.
Just like open loop.
That just means we got to do it again.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh, bless your heart. Mm.
Thank you.
Thank you.